Halfway through our wedding, Julian and I were in the dressing room changing our outfits. Suddenly, Julian turned to me, his voice laced with guilt. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I can't file our marriage license tomorrow." I smiled, not thinking much of it. "Then we can do it the day after tomorrow, or when you're done with this busy season. There's no rush." Julian avoided my gaze. His voice sank. "It's not a matter of time. I mean, we can't get legally married at all." My hand, which was gently resting on my slightly bloated belly, froze. I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you calling off the wedding?" Julian immediately pulled me into his arms, cooing softly. "Of course not. It's just 5 years ago I legally married someone else abroad. It was a business alliance arranged by my family. I had no choice. But Chloe, you're the only one I—" Before Julian could finish his sentence, the door was slammed open. Marcus, the best man, rushed in, panting. "Julian, there's a woman and a child outside. They're calling for you. She claims she's your wife from abroad, and that's your son." Before I could even process what was happening, Yvonne Reed pushed past Marcus, holding a young boy in her arms. She looked at Julian, tears streaming down her face, looking incredibly pitiful. "Julian, my mother passed away." The boy in her arms, about 3 or 4 years old, started crying along with her, pointing at Julian. "Daddy, Daddy." I stared at the boy. He looked at least 70% like Julian. My brain felt like it was about to explode. I violently pushed Julian away. I stood there, frozen for a few seconds. Slowly, the brutal reality sank in. The man I was marrying had already become someone else's husband 5 years ago. No. Perhaps I didn't even have the right to call Julian my husband. In the eyes of the law, I was the homewrecker. The other woman. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My whole body began to shake uncontrollably, and my knees buckled. Julian rushed forward to support me. "Chloe." Slap. Before he could utter another word, I swung my hand and slapped him hard across the face. I took a deep breath, desperately suppressing the roaring emotions inside me. "Julian, today is our wedding. The entire high society is out there. You might not care about your reputation, but I care about mine. Come out with me right now. We will announce an early end to the reception and send the guests away gracefully. Then, we will call both of our parents and handle this mess together." Knowing he was entirely in the wrong, Julian took the slap without a word. Seeing my cold expression, he tried to reach out again. "Chloe, don't say my name." I cut him off sharply. Even the sound of his voice made me sick to my stomach. I lifted the skirt of my wedding gown and turned to walk out. Julian hung his head and followed me. But just as I was about to push the door open, Yvonne screamed behind us. "Leo." "Leo, what's wrong?" "Don't scare Mommy." I looked back. For some reason, the little boy in Yvonne's arms had turned a terrifying shade of purple. His body was twitching, and he quickly lost consciousness. Julian darted past me, snatching the child from Yvonne's arms. He asked frantically, "What happened?" "It looks like an allergic reaction. What did you feed him?" Yvonne was sobbing hysterically, completely unable to give a coherent answer. Beside them, Marcus suddenly remembered something. He yelled, "Could it be that peanut pastry?" On our way here, the kid said he was hungry. When we passed the dessert table, he grabbed a piece. Maybe he's allergic to peanuts? Should we make him throw up? But at this point, Julian clearly didn't care about the details. He held the child tight and rushed toward the door. "There's no time. We have to go to the hospital right now." He didn't even look at me. He just ran past me, disappearing down the hallway with Yvonne and the child. I stood there in my white wedding dress, completely alone. I stared blankly at the empty doorway. My groom had just abandoned me at our wedding to run off with his secret wife and child. Emptiness, humiliation, anger. So many emotions choked my throat, leaving a metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I covered my face and wept silently, unable to even make a sound, until Marcus's hesitant voice broke the silence. "Chloe, there are still so many guests outside. What should we do about the wedding?" I forced myself to stop crying. I wiped my tears, walked back to the vanity, and applied a layer of powder to cover the tear stains. "Tell them." My voice cracked. "Tell them Julian felt suddenly ill. The wedding is over. I'm going out to see them off." I walked out of the dressing room, forcing a polite smile to bid the guests goodbye. Faced with my parents' confusion, I could only offer a vague excuse. Meanwhile, Julian's parents, Richard and Eleanor, helped me play along while offering me apologetic, guilty smiles. So they knew all along. My heart shattered into a million pieces. What was this? A family-wide conspiracy to trick me into a sham marriage? When the last guest left, Eleanor and Richard walked up to me, looking extremely anxious. "Chloe, Julian just called. He said he's back at your new villa, and everything with Yvonne, and the baby has been settled. You two just got married. Don't let some outsiders ruin your relationship. Go back and talk it out." Everything can be resolved. There's nothing a young couple can't resolve over a good talk. I let out a cold, mocking laugh. Mr. and Mrs. Cole, I don't think I can carry the title of wife anymore. Legally, Yvonne is Julian's wife. Chloe Vance, am the irrelevant outsider here. Since things have come to this, I think our family's business merger should be put on hold. I'm tired. I'm going home. Without waiting for their hypocritical excuses, I turned and drove straight to our new villa. The moment I pushed the door open, Julian stood up from the sofa.
He had been waiting for me.
He held a stack of papers and eagerly handed them to me. Chloe, you're back. Today.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Don't worry, I've settled everything with Yvonne. Look, this is a divorce agreement. Yvonne and I just signed it. Once we file it with the court, we will be officially divorced. After that, I'll marry you legally. I won't waste another second. I looked down at the papers but didn't take them. Instinctively, I touched my belly, intending to ask him about the child. But at that moment, a figure wearing an apron walked out of our kitchen. It was Yvonne. Oh, Miss Vance, you're back. Seeing that I didn't reply, Yvonne didn't look embarrassed at all. Instead, she turned to Julian with a playful, scolding tone. Julian, look at you. Miss Vance has had such a long, exhausting day. The moment she walks in, you start lecturing her. Can't this wait until we're at the dinner table? Go wash your hands, both of you. Dinner is ready. Julian nodded and reached out to hold my hand. I slapped his hand away. My face was dark as I glared at him. Why is she in her house? Seeing my anger, Julian quickly explained, Yvonne's father sold their house abroad. They have nowhere to stay right now. For convenience, I thought they could temporarily crash here. I've already sent my assistant to rent an apartment for them. It will take a week at most. Then they'll move out. But I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't going to be fooled by such a pathetic excuse. Julian, there are thousands of luxury hotels in New York, and you have at least a dozen properties under your name. And yet you chose to bring her to our newlywed home? Are you trying to disgust me? Get them out. Now. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, the smile on Julian's face began to fade. His tone grew cold. Chloe, can't you just show some compassion? Just treat them like a charity case and let them stay for a couple of days. They'll stay on the first floor, and we'll be on the second. They won't get in our way. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him with absolute disappointment. My silent gaze made Julian look flustered and guilty. He knew that no matter what, he was the one who had started this mess. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, Yvonne cut him off. Julian, Miss Vance, please don't fight because of us. I'll take Leo and find a hotel. Miss Vance, please don't blame Julian. This is all my fault. He sent me the divorce papers a year ago, but I was the one who kept stalling, hoping we still had a chance. I'm the one who ruined your wedding. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes again. She looked incredibly tragic, staring at Julian with deep longing. Then she blinked rapidly, forcing her tears back. All right, let's not talk about this. Go wash your hands and eat. I'll bring out the dishes. At first, I wasn't entirely sure. But watching Yvonne perform this little act, I was 100% certain she was a master manipulator, a total green tea bitch. How did I know? I could see the guilt and tenderness softening Julian's face as he watched her. If she really cared about not causing trouble, she wouldn't have put on the show. She would have checked herself into a hotel long before we arrived. Sure enough, halfway through dinner, Yvonne looked at me timidly. Miss Vance, I can survive in a hotel alone. But Leo is still so young. I'm afraid he won't get used to a hotel room. I noticed there's a fully furnished nursery on the first floor. Could we? I put down my fork, my response instant and cold.
No.
Yvonne gasped, clearly not expecting me to reject her so ruthlessly. She tried to play the pity card again. I know I don't have the right to ask for favors. But Leo grew up abroad, and his immune system is very weak. He has so many allergies, nuts, pollen, even dust mites. I'm just worried about his safety in a random hotel. Miss Vance, I'm begging you. Please. I frowned, losing my patience. Yvonne, do you not speak English? I said no. And I mean no. Having been completely shut down, Yvonne turned her tearful eyes to Julian, looking like a whipped puppy. Julian, Leo is your son after all. He was just in the ER because of a peanut allergy. Please. Julian was swayed. He looked at me, preparing to persuade me, but I cut him off before he could start. That nursery is prepared for my future child. If her child has a weak immune system, so does mine. I don't want strangers using the room and leaving germs behind. My words were harsh. It triggered Julian's protective paternal instincts. He slammed his fork onto the table, his guilt replaced by rage. Chloe, how can you say something so heartless? Germs? You wanted me to divorce, and I had my lawyer draft the papers immediately. You didn't want them to stay, and Yvonne willingly offered to leave. Now, it's just an empty nursery, and you're being this cruel? We don't even have a child yet. What's wrong with letting Leo stay there for a few days? Staring at Julian's furious, distorted face, I gently placed my hand over my lower abdomen.
My voice was dead calm.
We do have a child.
Julian, I'm pregnant.
Julian's self-righteous anger froze on his face. Even Yvonne looked completely stunned. I massaged my temples, feeling an overwhelming wave of exhaustion. I stood up. Forget it. If she wants to stay, let her stay. I have a nursery ready at the Vance family estate anyway. I'll just take my baby and live there. I'm full. I'm going to bed. I had just washed up and crawled into bed when Julian pushed the door open. He carried a plate of sliced fruit, creeping toward me like a guilty dog. He reached out, wanting to touch my stomach. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I didn't know you were pregnant. What I said earlier. I rolled over, turning my back to him and avoiding his hand. My attitude was ice cold. I really didn't want to hear his repetitive, meaningless apologies. I'm sorry. It's my fault. He never lacked apologies, but he also never hesitated to hurt me. Didn't he find his own words hypocritical? But I was too exhausted to even argue with him. I kept my eyes closed and muttered, I'm tired. I don't want to eat. Julian had no choice but to set the plate down. He leaned in closer, wanting to hold me. But before his fingers could even brush my shoulder, Yvonne's voice echoed from downstairs. Julian, can you help me give Leo a bath? I cut my finger while cooking and can't get it wet. Julian let out a sigh of frustration. He stood up and walked out. I curled my lips in a cold mock. Yvonne must be terrified right now, which was why she was desperately trying to keep Julian by her side. But that was fine with me. At least I could get a peaceful night's sleep. Throughout the night, Julian was kept incredibly busy. Julian, can you come over and help me look at some schools for Leo? Julian, Leo wants you to play Legos with him. Just for a little bit, please? Julian, Leo seems to have a fever. Can you come check on him? The next morning, when I woke up, Julian was still asleep in the nursery. I walked downstairs and saw Yvonne busy in the kitchen. She noticed me and offered a sweet, gentle smile. Miss Vance, you're up? Breakfast is almost ready. But I made everything according to Julian's taste. I hope you don't mind. I ignored her banter and walked closer. With a smirk, I asked, Miss Reed, first an allergic reaction, now a fever. You only have one son. If you keep using him like this, aren't you afraid you'll accidentally kill him? Yvonne's smile faltered. Seeing that Julian wasn't around, she dropped her innocent act. She glared at me, her eyes venomous. Are you going to tell Julian? Chloe, save your breath. I am the mother of his son. Do you think he will believe you or me? Let me tell you the truth. I have no intention of divorcing Julian. Blood is thicker than water. With Leo here, I will be tied to Julian for the rest of my life. He can never leave me. She looked at me with pure provocation. If you don't mind the disgust, feel free to stay as his mistress. While the three of us live happily ever after. Her snake-like gaze made me feel physically sick. Just as I turned to walk away, slap. Yvonne raised her hand and slapped herself hard across the face, causing a trickle of blood to escape her lip. Before I could react, she covered her face and began to sob hysterically. I'm sorry, Miss Vance. I know you hate me, but you can't just hit me. In the next second, I was violently shoved aside. Julian rushed in. He looked at Yvonne's swollen cheek, then turned to glare at me with boiling rage. Chloe, what is wrong with you? Just because Yvonne is sweet and gentle doesn't mean you can abuse her. She is Leo's mother. Leo is still asleep. If he wakes up and sees this, do you know how traumatized he'll be? Watching Julian shield Yvonne behind him, a sharp pain pierced my chest. I kept my face completely blank. I didn't touch her. Julian, we've known each other for years. If I do something, I own up to it. Julian fell silent. He looked at me, then at the crying Yvonne. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Finally, he brushed past me with a dark face, leading Yvonne away to apply ice to her cheek. I stood frozen in the kitchen. After a long while, I let out a self-deprecating laugh. I knew that no matter how much it hurt, I had to let go. Seeing how Julian wavered whenever Yvonne and his son were involved, he would be dragged down by them forever. I couldn't live my life under their shadow. I went up to the study and called my parents, telling them I was moving out of the villa. I was pregnant and couldn't handle any heavy lifting. I decided to let my parents send some movers to pack my things later. But as I stepped out of the study, Leo came running down the hallway at full speed. My instincts kicked in, and I tried to dodge him. I managed to avoid colliding with him, but the heavy toy airplane in his hand swung violently, striking me right in the abdomen. Ah! A sharp, agonizing pain exploded inside me. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, clutching my stomach. I looked up at Leo, through the tears of pain. In his other hand, he was holding peanut cookies? Isn't he severely allergic to peanuts? I weakly raised my hand, trying to warn him, "Don't eat, allergy." But only a broken gasp escaped my lips. The cramping in my abdomen grew worse, like a knife twisting inside me. Just then, Yvonne rushed around the corner. She knocked the cookie out of Leo's hand and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Julian, come quickly." Miss Vance fed Leo peanut cookies. "She's trying to kill him." Immediately, Julian's panicked footsteps rushed up the stairs, followed by his roaring voice.
What?
"Chloe, are you insane?" Julian bolted into the hallway. He saw me collapsed on the floor and assumed I was guilty. Without hesitation, seeing Leo starting to struggle for breath, Julian scooped the boy up, preparing to run. But I managed to reach out and grab the hem of his trousers. I wanted to beg him to save me. I felt a warm, heavy flow of blood rushing out of me, as if my insides were being torn apart. It hurt so bad. Our baby was slipping away, but the pain kept me from speaking. I could only look at him with desperate, pleading eyes. But Julian didn't even look down. He violently ripped his pants away from my grip, shouting at me, "Let go of me. Chloe, if anything happens to Leo, I will sue you for attempted murder. I will make sure you rot in prison." With that, he and Yvonne rushed past me and disappeared. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the triumphant smirk on Yvonne's face. I didn't expect her to be this insane. Triggering 2 severe allergic reactions in a child within such a short period of time was life-threatening and could leave permanent damage. But I couldn't think about that anymore. The excruciating pain drained all my strength. I couldn't even make a sound. I collapsed into the pool of my own blood. In the fading darkness, I heard the faint, terrified screams of my parents, followed by the blaring sirens of an ambulance. Then there was only silence. Meanwhile, in the pediatric ward on the 5th floor of the hospital, Leo's condition had finally stabilized. Julian pulled out his phone, which had been on silent. The moment the screen lit up, a barrage of missed calls flooded in. My father, my mother, and even his own parents. Dozens of missed calls in bright red. It sent a chill down Julian's spine. Before he could process it, the phone rang again. It was his father, Richard. The moment he picked up, his father's furious roar echoed through the speaker. "Julian, get your pathetic ass down to the 1st floor emergency room right this instant. Chloe had a miscarriage. She's hemorrhaging. They're trying to save her life." The world did not return to me in a rush of light or sound. It crept back in sensory fragments, cold and clinical. First came the sharp, synthetic smell of bleach, so thick it scraped the back of my throat. Then, the rhythmic, metallic beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor, a sound that felt entirely detached from the hollow cavity in my chest. When I finally managed to peel my eyelids open, the harsh fluorescent lights of the ceiling made my head throb. I tried to lift my hand to block the glare, but my arm felt like lead, weighted down by an IV drip. "Chloe? Oh, thank God. She's awake. Richard, call the doctor." My mother's voice was cracked, stripped of its usual poised elegance. She leaned over my bed, her face pale and her eyes heavily bloodshot. Behind her, my father stood by the window. His broad shoulders, usually held with the rigid posture of a man who commanded boardrooms, were slumped. He looked a decade older. "Mom." My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. The baby." My mother's lips trembled.
She didn't speak.
She only grabbed my cold hand, pressing it against her cheek as a single, heavy tear escaped her eye and wet my fingers. The silence in the room was the only answer I needed. The tiny heartbeat I had felt so brief a connection to, the future I had silently promised to protect while standing in that desolate kitchen, it was gone. Cut down by a toy airplane, a desperate woman's malice, and a man's blind, cowardly neglect. A terrible, suffocating emptiness expanded inside me. I didn't cry. My tear ducts felt as dry as ashes. Instead, a freezing, calcifying cold settled over my heart. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any inflection. My father turned around from the window. His eyes were dark, burning with a quiet, lethal rage. "Julian tried to come up here 3 hours ago, after the doctors moved you out of the operating room. I had our security detail throw him out of the building. His parents are downstairs in the lobby, begging to see you. They've been there all night." "Tell them to go away," I whispered. "I already did," my father said, his voice hard. "But they won't leave. Julian is sitting in his car in the parking lot. He's been calling my phone every 5 minutes." I stopped answering. "Don't answer," I said, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Never answer him again." At that moment, the door to the private suite creaked open. A young doctor walked in, checking my chart with a solemn expression. He gave my parents a quiet nod before stepping up to my bedside. "Miss Vance, I'm Dr. Chen. I'm incredibly sorry for your loss. The hemorrhaging was severe, but we were able to perform a successful uterine curettage and stop the bleeding. Your vitals are stabilizing, but you've lost a significant amount of blood.
You need to rest.
Will I be able to have children again?
I asked.
It wasn't that I wanted one now. The very thought made me feel physically ill, but I needed to know what they had taken from me. Dr. Chen offered a gentle, reassuring smile. Physically, yes. The surgery went well, and there was no permanent damage to your reproductive organs. But right now, your body has gone through massive trauma. You need at least a month of absolute bed rest and zero stress. Thank you, doctor, I murmured. As Dr. Chen left, I turned my head to my father. Dad, I want to go home. Not to the villa. To the Vance estate. I want to leave this place today. You're too weak to travel by car, Chloe, my mother protested gently, stroking my hair. Then hire a private ambulance, I said, my eyes locking onto my father's. I cannot stay here. If I see Julian's face, or hear his voice, I feel like I will die. My father didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone. I'll arrange it immediately. We'll have you out of here within the hour. As he stepped out to make the call, I closed my eyes. The image of Julian ripping his trousers from my bloody fingers played on a loop behind my eyelids. Chloe, if anything happens to Leo, I will sue you for attempted murder. I will make sure you rot in prison. Every syllable was a rusty nail driven into my soul.
He hadn't even looked down at me.
He had stepped over my bleeding body to save the child of a woman who had systematically dismantled our lives. The love I had carried for Julian Cole for 5 years didn't just die in that hallway. It turned to ash, and the wind had already blown it away. What remained was a cold, calculating resolve. They wanted a war. They had no idea who they were dealing with. 2 days later, I was lying in the master bedroom of the Vance estate. The room was flooded with warm sunlight, looking out over a manicured private garden, but I felt none of the warmth. My father entered, carrying a sleek black laptop. Behind him was Andrew Cole, our family's chief legal counsel and a man who had handled the Vance family's most sensitive matters for 20 years. Chloe, how are you feeling? My father asked, setting the laptop on the bedside table.
Better.
The physical pain is fading, I said, sitting up slightly. Did you get it? My father nodded, his expression grim. When we bought that villa, I didn't trust Julian's family's sudden eagerness for the merger. I had a state-of-the-art, cloud-connected security system installed throughout the house. Julian only knew about the perimeter cameras. He didn't know about the high-definition nanny cams disguised as smoke detectors in the hallways and the kitchen. Andrew stepped forward, opening the laptop. Miss Vance, we have retrieved the full, unedited footage from the second-floor hallway and the kitchen from the morning of the incident. I think you should see this. He pressed play. On the screen, the wide-angle camera of the second-floor hallway showed me stepping out of the study. Seconds later, little Leo came running around the corner. The footage was crystal clear. It showed Yvonne standing just around the bend, out of my line of sight. She had physically pushed the boy forward, whispering something in his ear and pointing directly at me. In Leo's hand was the heavy toy airplane. As I tried to dodge him, the child intentionally swung the toy, striking my abdomen with precise, brutal force. My breath hitched as I watched myself collapse on the screen, clutching my stomach in agony. But it was what happened next that made my blood run cold. Yvonne stepped out from the corner. She didn't look panicked. She looked entirely calm. She walked over to Leo, who was holding a cookie. She snatched the cookie from his hand, threw it onto the floor next to me, and then pulled a small EpiPen from her pocket. She stabbed it into Leo's thigh through his pants, even though the boy was perfectly fine and breathing normally. Only after she administered the injection did she start screaming at the top of her lungs. Julian, come quickly. Miss Vance fed Leo peanut cookies. My God, my mother gasped, covering her mouth from the doorway. She poisoned her own child? No, she injected him with epinephrine when he didn't even need it. Actually, it's worse, Andrew said, pausing the video. We subpoenaed the hospital records from Leo's admission that day. The pediatric toxicology report showed 0 traces of peanuts in his system. His sudden breathing difficulty wasn't an allergic reaction at all. The epinephrine injection, administered to a healthy child with no active anaphylaxis, caused a severe spike in his heart rate and blood pressure, mimicking a medical emergency. I stared at the screen, a cold smile touching my lips. She didn't try to kill him with peanuts. She used the EpiPen to fake an attack, so she could frame me. She knew Julian would panic and run. Yes, Andrew confirmed. And there's more. We investigated Yvonne Reed's background abroad. Our investigators in London and Zurich dug up her records. Julian's family told you they had a family-arranged business alliance 5 years ago. That was a lie. Andrew handed me a physical dossier. 5 years ago, Julian was managing the Cole Group's European branch in London. He met Yvonne at a high-end club. She was a hostess. She targeted him, got pregnant, and used the child to blackmail the Cole family. Julian's father, Richard, was terrified of a public scandal that would ruin their upcoming IPO. So, They quietly registered a marriage abroad to legitimize the child, but they kept it completely hidden from the public. So it wasn't an arranged business alliance, I whispered, the puzzle pieces finally locking into place. It was a shotgun wedding to cover up a scandal with a club hostess. Exactly, Andrew said. But here's the golden nugget. 3 years ago, Yvonne was caught in an insurance fraud scheme in Switzerland. She had tried to claim a massive payout by faking the theft of high-end art. To avoid prison, she signed a secret divorce and liability waiver with Julian, which was finalized in a Swiss court. However, because the divorce was filed under her maiden name and registered in a different canton, Julian's lawyers in New York didn't verify its status properly. Wait, I said, my brow furrowing. If they were divorced 3 years ago, why did Julian tell me they were still married? Andrew chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Because Yvonne lied to him. When she showed up in New York, she presented him with a forged, active marriage certificate from a different European jurisdiction, claiming the Swiss divorce was never finalized due to a clerical error. She threatened to expose their active marriage to the Vance family and ruin the merger unless Julian paid her $10 million and let her move into the villa. And Julian, being the spineless coward he is, believed her without checking, I said, a hollow laugh escaping my chest. He was so terrified of losing the Vance family's investment that he decided to play along, hoping to quietly bribe her and get a quick divorce before I found out. My father stepped forward, resting a heavy hand on my shoulder. They underestimated us, Chloe. They thought you were a naive girl who would swallow her pride for the sake of a quiet life. They thought the Vance family would protect our reputation by covering up their mess. What do you want to do, sweetheart? My mother asked, her eyes shining with protective fury. We can destroy them. Just say the word. I looked at the laptop screen, at the image of Yvonne's triumphant smirk as she framed me, and then at the memory of Julian's disgusted face as he abandoned me. No, I said, my voice steady and cold as dry ice. Destroying them quickly is too merciful. I want them to dismantle themselves. I want them to tear each other apart until there is nothing left but dust. I looked up at Andrew. Andrew, are the merger documents still in the due diligence phase?
Yes.
The final signing was scheduled for next week. Our family was set to inject $80 million into the Cole Group to save them from their liquidity crisis. Good, I said. Pull the plug. But don't do it quietly. I want a press release issued tomorrow morning. The next morning, the financial world of New York was rocked by a massive earthquake. The Vance Group issued a formal, public statement. Due to a material breach of trust, ethical concerns, and a failure of due diligence on the part of the Cole Group, the Vance family has officially terminated all negotiations regarding the proposed merger and capital injection. Effective immediately, all joint ventures are suspended. Within 10 minutes of the press release, the Cole Group's stock price plummeted by 15%. By noon, it was down 30%. My phone, which I had switched to a new private number, remained silent. But my father's assistant informed us that Julian's father, Richard Cole, had suffered a minor panic attack and was currently desperately trying to secure meetings with our board members. They were all flatly rejected. At 2 p.m., a knock sounded on my bedroom door. Chloe, my mother said, stepping in. Julian is at the front gate. Security stopped him, but he's refusing to leave. He's kneeling on the pavement in the rain. I walked over to the window. The Vance estate's heavy iron gates were visible in the distance. Even from here, I could see a pathetic, slumped figure in a soaked suit, huddled against the cold metal bars. 2 days ago, this man had threatened to put me in prison while I lay bleeding on the floor. Now, he was kneeling in the dirt like a beggar. Let him in, I said quietly. My mother looked surprised. Are you sure, Chloe? You shouldn't stress yourself. I'm not stressed, Mom, I said, looking at my reflection in the vanity mirror. I looked pale, but my eyes were clear and sharp. I am perfectly calm. Let him come to the pavilion in the garden. I don't want his dirty shoes inside our house. 10 minutes later, I walked down the stone path to the glass pavilion. Julian was waiting there, escorted by 2 burly Vance security guards who stood like statues behind him. He was drenched to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead, his expensive designer suit ruined. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. Chloe. He took a step forward, but the security guards instantly blocked him. Chloe, please, Julian sobbed, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I was a fool. I was blind. I didn't know. I didn't know you were bleeding. I thought. Yvonne told me you tried to poison Leo, and I panicked. I was terrified for the kid. I sat down on a wrought iron chair, elegantly crossing my legs. I didn't offer him a seat. I didn't even offer him a towel. Is Leo okay? I asked, my voice entirely conversational. Julian nodded quickly, wiping rain and tears from his face. Yes, he's fine. The doctor said it was a false alarm. It wasn't a real allergic reaction. Chloe, please, you have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. The wedding. I wanted to marry you more than anything. Do you know why the merger was cancelled, Julian? I asked, ignoring his declarations of love. Julian flinched. My father. He's going crazy.
The stock is crashing.
If the Vance Group doesn't inject the capital by the end of the month, our creditors will foreclose on our main holdings. We'll be bankrupt. Chloe, please, don't let your father do this. It was a misunderstanding between us. We shouldn't let business get ruined by personal issues. I let out a soft, melodious laugh. It sounded beautiful, but to Julian, it must have felt like a physical slap. A misunderstanding? I repeated. Julian, you stood by and watched your mistress parade through our newlywed home. You screamed at me, called me heartless, and abandoned me in a pool of my own blood. My baby, our baby, died because you chose to run away with a woman who forged her marriage papers to blackmail you. Julian froze. His face went from pale to completely translucent. What did you say? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Your wife, Yvonne, divorced you 3 years ago in Switzerland. The papers she showed you were forged. She used your own cowardice to extort $10 million from you. And the allergic reaction that made you run? She faked it. She injected Leo with an EpiPen when he didn't need it, just to make you panic. No, that's impossible, Julian stammered, shaking his head in denial. She wouldn't. She loves Leo. He's her son. Andrew, I called out. Our lawyer stepped out from the shadows of the pavilion, carrying a tablet. He played the security footage of the hallway. Julian watched. I watched his eyes trace the screen, watched his mouth fall open as he saw Yvonne physically push Leo, watched her throw the cookie on the floor, and watched her calmly stab the EpiPen into the boy's leg before screaming for him. By the end of the video, Julian was shaking violently. He collapsed onto his knees, his hands clutching his head. She did this, he whispered, his voice trembling with horror. She killed my baby. She made me leave you. No, Julian. I corrected him, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. She didn't make you do anything. You chose to leave. You chose to believe her over me. You chose to threaten me with prison while your child was dying inside me. Chloe, I didn't know. He wailed, reaching out to grab my shoes, but the guard stepped in, pinning his arms behind his back. I swear to God, I didn't know. I'll kill her. I'll destroy her. Please, give me another chance.
I'll make this right.
I'll file police reports. I'll put her in jail. Oh, you will. I smiled smoothly. But you won't do it for me. You'll do it to try and save your own skin. Too bad it won't work. I stood up, brushing a speck of dust off my cashmere sweater. Julian, the Vance Group will not be saving the Cole Group. In fact, we've just bought out 40% of your debt from your primary creditors. By next Monday, we will initiate foreclosure proceedings on your family's estate and your corporate headquarters. Chloe.
No.
You can't do this. Julian screamed, his voice filled with pure, unadulterated terror. We'll lose everything. My parents, they have nothing to do with this. Your parents knew about your marriage 5 years ago, and they helped you hide it from me so they could secure our investment, I said, looking down at him with utter disgust. They are accomplices to your fraud. They deserve exactly what's coming to them. I turned my back on him. Get him out of here, I told the guards. He's polluting the garden. Chloe, I love you.
Please.
Chloe. His desperate screams faded as the guards dragged him down the driveway. I stood in the quiet garden, breathing in the fresh, rain-washed air. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The destruction of the Cole family was a masterclass in corporate and legal warfare. My father and I didn't have to do much to set Julian and Yvonne against each other. Their own toxic, parasitic natures did the work for us. Once Julian realized Yvonne had lied about the marriage and faked the medical emergencies, his guilt turned into a monstrous, savage rage. He didn't go home to talk. He went back to the villa with a team of security guards, threw Yvonne's belongings into the street, and tried to physically drag her out of the house. Yvonne, ever the fighter, called the police, claiming domestic violence. The police arrived to find Julian screaming threats of murder while Yvonne stood on the driveway, holding a crying Leo, presenting her bruised arms, which she had likely inflicted on herself, to the officers. Julian was arrested on the spot for assault and battery. While he sat in a holding cell, our lawyer, Andrew, quietly delivered the security footage of the hallway and the pediatric medical reports to the district attorney's office, along with a formal complaint of child endangerment, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit extortion. By the next morning, the tables had completely turned. Yvonne was arrested at a local luxury hotel where she had fled. She was charged with felony child abuse, reckless endangerment of a minor, and extortion. Because Julian's family's assets were being frozen due to our foreclosure proceedings, Julian couldn't even afford the bail set for his domestic assault charge. He was trapped in a county jail, while his parents, Eleanor and Richard, were forced to watch their life's work disintegrate in real time. A week later, I received a visitor at the Vance estate. It was Eleanor Cole, Julian's mother. She no longer looked like the elegant, haughty high society matriarch I had known. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup was messy, and her hands shook as she held a plastic cup of water my mother had begrudgingly given her. "Chloe," Eleanor wept, practically falling to her knees in our parlor. "I beg of you, please stop the foreclosure. We are being evicted from our home next week. All our bank accounts are frozen. Julian is in jail. He's losing his mind. He's being treated like a common criminal." I sat across from her, sipping my tea. "He is a common criminal, Eleanor. He committed fraud. He attempted to enter a bigamous marriage with me to swindle my family out of $80 million. We didn't know about Yvonne's forged papers." Eleanor cried. "We thought they were divorcing. We thought it was all settled. We only kept it from you because we didn't want to cause trouble before the wedding." "You kept it from me because you are greedy," I said, my voice dead calm. "You saw the Vance family as a golden ticket, a life raft for your sinking company. You didn't care about my happiness or my life. You knew I was pregnant, yet you let that toxic woman move into the house where your grandchild was supposed to live." Eleanor's face crumpled. "We are sorry, Chloe. We're so sorry. Please just spare our house. It's been in the Cole family for 3 generations. Don't take it from us." "Your house will be auctioned off next Tuesday," I said, setting my teacup down with a soft, final clink. "I've already instructed our brokers to buy it. I plan to tear it down and turn the land into a public park. I'll name it after the child I lost." Eleanor gasped, her eyes widening in horror. She realized, finally, that there was no mercy to be found here. The gentle, accommodating Chloe Vance they had tried to exploit was dead. You are a monster," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling with hatred. "I learned from the best," I smiled. "Now, please leave. The smell of desperation is giving me a headache." The trial of Yvonne Reed and Julian Cole became the trial of the decade in New York high society. Because of the high-profile nature of both families, the courtroom was packed with reporters, socialites, and cameras. I attended every single day, sitting in the front row of the public gallery, wearing elegant, dark designer suits. I wanted them to see me. I wanted my presence to be a constant, suffocating reminder of what they had destroyed. Yvonne sat at the defense table, looking disheveled but still trying to play the victim. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she was a desperate mother acting under the duress of a wealthy, abusive family. But then, the prosecution played the security footage. The courtroom went dead silent as the video of Yvonne pushing Leo, throwing the cookie, and cold-bloodedly injecting him with the EpiPen was projected on a massive screen. The jury's expressions turned to pure disgust. When Yvonne took the stand, the prosecutor, a ruthless woman handpicked by our family's legal connections, tore her to pieces. "Miss Reed, you claim you were terrified of the Vance family's influence. Yet, the security footage shows you smiling, actually smiling, as Miss Vance collapsed on the floor in agony. Can you explain that?" I was panicking, Yvonne sobbed, her voice ringing hollow. "I didn't know she was hurt. I was just trying to protect my son. By injecting him with an unnecessary, dangerous dose of epinephrine," the prosecutor retorted, slamming the medical reports onto the podium. "The toxicologist proved your son had no peanuts in his system. You risked his life to frame an innocent, pregnant woman. You did it for money, didn't you?"
No.
"That's not true," Yvonne screamed, her composure cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at me in the gallery. "She's the one. She stole Julian from me. She deserved it. She deserved to lose that baby." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Her defense attorney buried his face in his hands. Beside her, Julian, who was testifying as a state witness against her in hopes of a reduced sentence for his own fraud charges, looked at her with pure, murderous hatred. "You psychotic bitch," Julian roared, lunging across the table at her. "You killed my child. You ruined my life. Order. Order in the court," the judge yelled, banging his gavel repeatedly as bailiffs rushed to pull them apart. I sat in the gallery, my hands folded neatly in my lap, a quiet, serene smile on my face. They were like 2 rabid dogs in a cage, tearing each other's throats out.
It was a beautiful sight.
In the end, the jury needed less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Yvonne Reed was found guilty on all counts, including felony child endangerment, extortion, and criminal conspiracy. Because of the severity of her actions and her lack of remorse, she was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security state prison. Leo was permanently removed from her custody. Because Julian was also facing significant prison time for corporate fraud and bigamy, and his parents were completely bankrupt, my father quietly arranged for a wealthy, kind-hearted family in another state to adopt the boy under a new name. Leo would grow up far away from the toxic poison of his parents, with a chance at a normal, happy life. As for Julian, his plea deal fell through after his violent outburst in court. He was sentenced to 7 years for grand larceny, corporate fraud, and bigamy. His family's company was completely liquidated, their assets seized, and their name permanently dragged through the mud. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a beautiful, newly built villa overlooking the cliffs of Amalfi, Italy. The Mediterranean Sea was a brilliant, endless blue, sparkling under the warm afternoon sun. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wild lemons and salt water. I looked down at my hand. My fingers were bare. No engagement ring, no wedding band. Just my own clean, unblemished skin. Behind me, the glass doors opened and my mother walked out, carrying 2 glasses of freshly squeezed lemonade. "It's beautiful here, Chloe," she said, leaning against the railing beside me. "Your father just called. The demolition of the coal estate is complete. The construction of the park has begun. It will be ready by next spring." "Thank you, Mom," I said, taking a sip of the lemonade. The sweetness was perfect, with just a hint of tartness. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. "About Julian?" I stared out at the horizon, where the blue of the sea met the blue of the sky. "Only as a stranger I once knew," I replied honestly. "I don't hate him anymore. Hate is an emotion, and he doesn't deserve even a shred of my feelings. He is exactly where he belongs. And I am here." My mother smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Yes, you are. You survived, my beautiful girl. And you have a whole life ahead of you." I leaned into her touch, closing my eyes. The pain of the loss would always be a quiet scar on my heart, but it no longer throbbed. The storm had passed, the wreckage had been cleared, and from the ashes of a stolen wedding, I had finally rebuilt my own empire. I was Chloe Vance. I was free, I was whole, and my story was just beginning.